Okay, so I did my 6-ish layers of my color. Hold on, let me move stuff so you can see my blending a little bit. Okay, there we go. All right, so then I have to kind of go back in with the original color, and I have not hardly cleaned out my brush. I just keep adding, so that's another way you can get kind of like a lot of similar colors. So I'm going to come back in with whatever's on my brush. I'm going to take a scoop of my original color that I started with for the sphere, and I'm going to scoop up like whatever I have left over of these, add it to it so it's a slightly different color, dunk my brush in some water, swirl it around. Okay, kind of flatten, get off some of that. So you are going to have to kind of go back in and put, just like with the Van Gogh and pointillism, I want to put some of the original color back in. But as I'm doing that, I'm picking up some of my wet paint, so it's changing my color, which is fine. I just kind of swirl it back into my original puddle. So while I have this kind of medium value color on my brush, I'm just kind of wiping it in brush strokey ways into my background, a little bit on my surface, like in some of the darker parts. Okay, maybe a little bit on the edge of my cast shadow. I feel like over here it needs to have some of the original color again. That looks black, but it's dark, dark purple. Put some of the original. Trying to get a clean edge. Okay, so then I'm going to go back in to that puddle that I already have. I rinsed out my brush, pick up some white. I'm going to add back in the highlight. So it's a lighter version than my original color. And so here's where it's really starting to just kind of blend in. So I'm going to pick up some of that original color again and be more precise about my brush stroke. Let's see, I'm going to touch in the background a little bit. And I'm going to go right up to the edge, pull away. Go right up to this edge. I'll just kind of blend that in the background so it kind of looked. Just let me do some water. Just water on my brush. So I wiped off my brush on the newspaper too. Okay, that looks bad. Let me grab some red. Mix up a redishy. Put some back in. Okay, that's looking a little. And then I'm gonna let that dry and come back on top to fix that. Although my purple is starting to dry up, so I'm gonna do that now. Okay. So then I am going to use some white to add some highlight. So straight up white, but it's gonna blend in since I already kind of added a color there. And then here I'm gonna have to fix. So now I'm kind of looking at my image and kind of saying, all right, what does the edge look like compared to the background? And I'm doing some shorter strokes, obviously. Okay, and I'll put in some darker. I did add like some touches of yellow, purple, orange, pink, dark purple. a little bit of blue, and then I put some purple back on top of it for in here. Oh, that's hard to see. There we go. It's shiny. All right. Okay, so now I do think I'm going to take some of that original color, maybe a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white to make a slightly different version of that color. Especially in there where I messed up. And then, like you're kind of wiping off your brush in a way. Okay, so I'm gonna put some of that on the surface in the areas where it looks not like actual brush strokes. Okay, this is hard to see. I apologize, but can I get it to a different angle? No. That's not the camera. It is the camera, but it's also this lighting in the classroom. All right. It's because some of it's wet and some of it's dry, so you're getting the reflections on the wet paint. Okay, so then I have my purple, so I'm just going to add a little bit of water to it because it's starting to dry out. I'm going to mix it in with my blue. I just kind of dunked my brush in the water and I used whatever pink was already on it to change the purple slightly. I feel like I need to put back in and along the edge a little bit. Put back in that core shadow. I'm going to touch it in the cast shadow on the surface. Touch it into the darker parts in the background. And honestly, I've been using the background to just kind of wipe off my brush. And we're calling it Post-Impressionism. Just kind of trying to make it look brush strokey. All right, so I'm gonna let that set for a bit and I'm gonna work on the surface. So I'm gonna come back with some of that original color and bring back the light. And so I would practice kind of turning your brush to get some different effects. Oh, sorry, it's hard for you guys to see. And I'm definitely gonna layer a little bit more on top of this. And I'm also checking like where's the value difference where the two, like the fact that the surface is lighter than the sphere over here. Going right up to the edge and pulling away. And now I'm just kind of like wiping off my brush to fade it into the background. I feel like I need a little bit more of that original color for the surface over here. And I'm not really rinsing out my brush. Okay, so now I'm gonna mix my two reds together, or maybe like red and my original color. Because I wanna get some midtones. And I just put it into a pile that I already had. That way it's a similar color already. So the good thing about paint is if you're like, oh, it looks gross, then try not to use opposite colors. Like I added orange in there, and then the orange with the purple, there's just too much yellow in the orange. It did not look good. Got some weird, gross purple. Okay, I'm gonna add some into the surface and the cast shadow to get it to fade out a little. Come back with some of that original surface color. I did not clean off my brush, just picked up the color. Now I am kind of just wiping off my brush. Okay, so now I'm going to pay a little more attention to where it's lighter compared to the sphere. So I'm going to pick up white, and I'm just going to mix whatever I have on my brush in with the white. Dunk my brush in water just a tiny bit, swirl it around. That looks like the same as the background color. All right, let me add a little bit more white. Okay, right up to that edge. Looking at wherever else it's lighter. So I do a couple of brush strokes and then flip my brush over. I feel like that is fine, but I'll probably just add a couple. Blend in with what I already have. All right, now I'm going to focus on edges, like getting the reflected light area. And then kind of just gently doing less pressure to fade it in. So putting that back in, and then that looks pretty intense. So I'm going to go back with a little bit of kind of red to dull it. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Okay, then I'm just going to wipe off my brush because this is like a mid-tone. Darker edge along that side. Fading in. Okay, and then I'm just kind of, like I said before, I've just been using the background to kind of wipe off my brush. Just use up what's on there. Alright, I'm going to come back with my original color, but with maybe a little bit of white in with it. So I'm just going to mix it with that light pink color I made for the surface. Well, that is hard for you guys to see. That is barely different than what I had before. Okay, well, let's use it to fade down. Then I'm going to wipe it. All right, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow onto my brush to see if I can get some more variety in the highlight. So I think the key is that I'm never really rinsing out my brush and just keep adding and adding and adding. And if you get a gross color, it's because you're using colors that are too far away from each other on the color wheel. Okay, so this yellowy, I'm definitely not going to fade into the core shadow because purple and yellow make brown. I want to avoid brown. And then I feel like my last layer is going to be white with the color itself. So I'm going to let that be for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to take a double look at the background. I feel like this side needs to get a little bit darker. So, and I need to make some more distinct kind of brush strokes. I'm gonna flip this upside down so I can get right up to the edge of the sphere. Ooh, just put it in paint. That is how I always get paint on stuff. Okay, I'll remove that. I always get paint on my sleeve. All right. going right up to the edge and kind of fading out to get a clean edge. Okay, that slightly darkened it. Then I'm going to go a little bit lighter on this side. Right, I feel like that edge is pretty good, so I'll just kind of leave it. And I turned my sphere upside down, so when I was looking at it, it's the same direction as this. Okay, I feel like background looks good. Surface. I think I just need a little more variety in here. So actually, I am going to pop some of that yellow. But turning it so I can get right up to the edge and pull away. And then over here, I'm just gonna wipe off my brush a little bit, just so I have some of that color. Okay. Surface. Actually, I'm just gonna mix these two colors. And just add some white. I got like a peachy. How's that look on my sphere? It's okay. Add a little bit of red. Actually, I'm just going to scrape all this into this one. Okay, I get a similar color to what I have before for the sphere. So I am going to use some of that to kind of, ooh, that's too much. I'm going to pull some red back into that. Too much, too much. Where else do I need that? Okay, I'm going to rinse out my brush, let's dry it off, take some of this red, kind of tap on top of that and in between. Some in the cast shadow. Okay, so for the highlight, I am gonna add another layer of white straight up, and then I'll probably do another layer of the original color. So I am gonna get pretty close to the edge. Really looking at my image to see like, okay, you know, how light is this edge compared to the background, compared to the surface? I flipped over my brush because I was starting to pick up some of those other colors. If you need to, I'm using my small brush, but you could definitely use the tiny brush along the edges if you wanted to clean up your edge. use the original color for that. All right, original color. I did wipe off my brush to dry it. Taking a little bit of my original color. Throw it a little bit. Okay, straight up white for the surface as well. Actually, let me do a little bit more. Then I want this to dry a little bit while I'm working on the surface. I feel like this edge got funky. All right, so this technique is also knowing when to stop. I tend to overwork my paint. Like I just want to make it better and then it ends up looking worse. Painting is not my favorite, but a lot of you guys really like it. Actually, I do like how the highlight's looking, but let me... And I always just try to make it slightly better and I mess it up. Okay, I'm gonna let that be because I am gonna take some of the original color kind of back in. Okay, so highlight's done. I do think I need a little bit more on the core shadow. Probably with some darker version of the original color. Maybe a little bit of violet mixed in with it. What do I not like? I don't like some of these. And I'm going to take some of my purple, a little bit of water on my brush to swirl it because it's starting to dry. Okay, this area I feel like I need to fix with the original color, but I'm gonna let that be for a minute because I'm just like picking up the color that's underneath it that's still wet. So we'll let that sit for a minute. I'm gonna take some white, and I want like mostly white, but I want a little touch of color in it. I'm gonna go back on the surface. So notice that I stayed pretty horizontal on the surface, and then the background is a different direction, so that helps kind of visually separate. And then of course the direction on the sphere helps to further visually separate. Okay, I feel like that surface is pretty good. I'm gonna work in the cast shadow just a little bit. Fading that up, and then I'm going to take some of that original color back in. So every time I'm dunking it in water, I am drying off a little bit. Okay. A little bit of marks just to kind of make it blend in. Okay. That looks a little bit better. Trying to fix up that edge a little. I still feel like it could come out a little bit more. And I'm going to take another color. So my last step is to take some of the original color of the sphere, just a little bit, and I'm gonna throw a little bit in the reflected light. So I'm trying not to touch very much. Ooh, that's too much right there. Okay, I'm to the point where I'm just messing stuff up. Gotta be done. Okay, too bad these colors don't look on the screen as they do in real life. All right, so there's a example of post-impressionism. So in the background, I'm just kind of wiping my brush, trying to blend it a little bit. Definite brush strokes and then direction as well. And here it's a little brush strokey. But that's what you want. You want to definitely see visible brush strokes. Whatever kind of brush strokes you choose to use. Kind of make that a little bit. Then they're visible. So it's kind of like a mixture between blending and Van Gogh, unless you've chosen to do like any of these. The blotting, I'll probably show you guys that on my actual painting, but if you had to layer and kind of build up, you're just kind of blotting and tapping. So it's kind of like pointillism, but you're using a bigger brush. And you definitely, for this, you have to kind of let your layers dry a little bit more, which I started out and then it was just smudging all over the place. I'm like, I'll just make it be like the surface. So I ended up having to change that. All right, good luck. So refine, this is it's very painterly. Some people would say sloppy, but it's a very painterly way of painting. You just want to make sure that you have clean edges. And so again, if you need to take your tiny brush and kind of do the same type of marks along the edges to clean up, then by all means, please do that. I'll see you in the blending video.